Here is the truth. God chooses the ones who feels the most unworthy, the most ill-equipped, because they are the ones who lean not on their strength, but on His. And let's be real, that voice of doubt, it's always there. The voice that says, you're not enough, you're not smart enough, you're not brave enough, you're not equipped enough for this fight. I have said this myself, heard this myself so many times more than I could even care to count. But I've learned, if I've learned anything on this journey, is that being chosen doesn't mean being ready or even deserving. It means stepping up anyway, with all your imperfections, into and trusting that God's power is made perfect in weakness.
Well, hey friends, it's Adam. You're listening to The Conversation. Today we're at episode 271, and I just want to prepare you to be inspired by today's guest. Wherever you are today, just know I'm thrilled that you're tuning in. I don't take it lightly that you would. My hope is in the next 28 or so minutes, if you're trying to figure out how to make a difference with your life, or you're walking through an unpretty part of being human, my hope is that you would know you are not alone. Before we go any further today, I need, and more than that, I want to give a huge shout out to our partners. I thank God for both of these partners. Our first partner is Vern Eide. Vern Eide Mitsubishi is a growing, employee-owned, faith-based company that strives to deliver dreams and transform lives. Just in short, they are a company who is wanting to make a difference in this world, who also just so happens to sell automobiles. Honestly, I've purchased my last 3 vehicles from Vern Eide, and I'm proud to tell people that that's where I've got my vehicles from, because of the difference that they're making. If you are looking for an Outlander like I drive and love, or you're looking for an Acura, a Chevy, a Honda, or GMC, you name the make of vehicle, they will most likely have it. And no matter where you live, Vern Eide will ship it to you. Go visit verneide.com. Again, don't look anyplace else. Go to verneide.com. Our second partner today is the International Justice Mission. I cannot say enough about IJM. IJM is the largest anti-slavery organization in the world. That's unbelievable. And today I just want to share a quick story about an amazing woman from northern Uganda named Helen. Helen is a widow, and her entire family was displaced from her home and her land because of a brutal war that took place in Uganda. Well, when she returned to her land, she found out her neighbors were claiming her land as their own. Well, this land was critically important. It wasn't just where they lived. Instead, both Helen and 161 of her family members were relying on this land for their livelihood. Well, these neighbors were brutal, though. They were threatening Helen and her family. They were intimidating them, threatening their very lives. Well, when IJM got word with this, they took up Helen's case, and 2 years later, these neighbors pleaded guilty to their crimes. And today, Helen and her family are back on this land. How incredible is that, friends? If you want to partner and join the amazing work that IJM is doing to free people, to bring justice to people like Helen all around the world, I want to invite you to go to ijm.org and become a freedom partner. I'm a freedom partner myself. A freedom partner is just someone who gives on a monthly basis to IJM and the amazing work that they're doing. And I want to encourage you to do the same. Go to ijm.org and become a freedom partner today. Well, friends, if you spend any amount of time watching the news or looking at social media, you know that we live in a broken world where both wonderful and horrible, tragic things happen every single day. And so when it comes to those tragic things, what can you and I do to change this, right? Well, today I'm so excited and honored to share our guest with you. Her name is Anu, and just again, prepare to be inspired. Anu and her team that she works with have helped free 10,000 people out of slavery, okay? Let me say that again, 10,000 people out of slavery. She's amazing. She downplays just the incredible things that she's done. I'm so excited for you to hear. Anu, is a human rights lawyer who currently is the CEO of IJM in Canada, and I just cannot wait for you to hear a part of her story. On that note, as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation. Well, Anu, we typically hear a person's highlight reel. Are you
Mhm.
willing to share a current unpretty part of your life? Something stressful, discouraging, grief. It could be anything big or small.
Um, One of the hardest parts of my life right now is watching the people that I love get old. You know, aging parents is one of those realities that we all know is coming. Yet when it does, it kind of feels like a quiet storm. It's
Ugh.
seeing the strong hands that raise me tremble slightly now, or hearing stories on repeat because memory has been elusive. There is grief in watching the slow transmission, grief for the people they were and the people they're becoming. And then there is this unexpected loss of friends. Some have drifted apart, while others have left this world entirely. So it's hard not to think about their families, their children, their partners, the gaping spaces left behind. And I tend to create these stories in my head, imagining their last conversations, their goodbyes, like that never feel like enough. And though these aren't my direct losses, I grieve for them. So, what I'm learning through the season is how finite everything is. It's not
Ugh.
pretty, it's not glamorous, but it's real. I feel this weight, this urgent need to live better, to live in a way that when my time comes, I'll know I've given it my all, that I've exited well without leaving things unsaid or love ungiven. It's a reminder that no matter how hard life can be, I have a responsibility to live well today because we don't know how many tomorrows we have left.
Whoa. Wow, that was beautiful. I didn't know if you were going to mention your twins again and racing twins, but that is
Raising
such
twins is hard, but it's delightful. Right. It
the
gives me the purpose to, live another day with joy.
what you shared though is so true. I'm 42 and I feel like I'm seeing many people
Yeah.
losing parents or losing loved ones who are younger, and it's just an interesting thing to observe that. And even me, my parents, both my mom and my dad, are my heroes.
Yeah.
And yet to see their age begin to set in different ways, whether it's helping my mom up steps now or just some clarity stuff from my dad. My oldest son is a senior in high school, and he said, Dad, it almost feels like, and he said it in a very respectful way. He said, it almost feels like you're becoming your parents' parent.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah. I said, why do you say that? And he's like, well, you are starting to do things that a parent would do. And I said,
Yeah.
in Hudson, believe it or not, sometime there's going to be a day that comes where you begin to parent me.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a sobering reality because it's like, there's no way. He's a senior in high school. There's so many things that he is clueless about, even though he's a very sharp and intelligent young man. I'm like,
Yeah.
you are not ready to parent this guy yet. But there, but there will be a day. And so that's just a humbling thing. Thanks for sharing that. Uh,
Yeah. And sorry, just to add to
yeah.
that, speaking of like my twin daughters, they speak a lot about death these days, and they're just 5. And I oftentimes tell them, so they're like, so what happens? Like, you wouldn't be there when you die? Will you die tomorrow, next week, 50 years? And I find that it really helps having, bringing God into that conversation with them early on, because in a weird kind of a way, it prepares them. And now Ela, my younger twin, talks about, but Mama, even if you're dead, you're living forever. Like, you're there for eternity. So I'll join you. And then I'm like, yeah, but you take your time. Yeah, it's hard, even when you have those conversations with, like, even with Hudson. Bless
Yeah.
your heart. Thank you for doing it. The
No.
world needs more parents having those hard conversations.
Well, no, I'm a work in progress in the parenting department. My devotional this morning was reflecting on the story of Job, and Job lost everything all at once while he was still alive.
Yeah.
But it said all of us will eventually experience all the same losses that Job had.
Yeah.
Most likely when we take our last breath. Lord willing, we're not still alive like Job when he had all that loss. But I
Yeah.
just thought that was a profound, I just thought to myself, wow, I would never have verbalized it like that. And yet that is so true. At some
Yeah.
point, we will give up everything, our loved ones, our possessions, our house, even our physical life. And
Yeah.
it's a sobering thing. Anu, so if you want to
Yeah.
share the Cliff Notes version of your story, just your background, where you're from, education.
No, really, I'd love to say that I came here by, sheer brilliance and strategy, but that would be an absolute lie. I didn't get here on my own. And honestly, I'm not even entirely sure how I got here. I, I have, or gotten anywhere. I've always cared about social justice. But I did not know how deep that went up till I'm fast forwarding several episodes of my
Yeah.
life, but, because it's boring and mundane. Like education, yes, I'm a lawyer. I have an MBA, a master's in organizational leadership from universities from around the world. Yeah, intellectual property, all of these things, which I thought was the only way I can get to where I thought that I can get to.
Whoa.
And I was pretty successful. At 23, I was in one of the best universities I can imagine, leading the entire legal department and living life. And then, and then my first experience with violence completely changed everything, everything. And that was also when, soon after I was slowly recovering, did I first enter into IJM. I stepped into IJM as the director of legal with a very healthy dose of humility and a slightly unhealthy dose of imposter syndrome. I mean, I wasn't even qualified to lead goldfish in a bowl at that point, you know, let alone a team of brilliant lawyers. But there I was, trying to look like I knew what I was doing while hoping my team didn't figure out that I had no clue. Then I got honest with them. Luckily, they didn't just tolerate my awkward fumbling, they actually led me through it.
Whoa.
There's this African concept on leadership. You can't lead if there is no one following. So the leader is a leader because there are followers. So my version of this was I'm leading because everyone else is too nice to say otherwise. But somehow it worked. And I love the Africans come up with these amazing concepts.
They
I
do.
am because of you. I am because of you. Anyway, so just when I was starting to feel like, maybe I had some grip on the job, IGM asked me to lead this gigantic project funded by Google. I'd barely been with IGM for 6 months, and they wanted me to rescue thousands of people, make sure they stayed free, and train thousands of officials. Meanwhile, I was still trying to figure out where the coffee machine was. So naturally, I did. I did what any rational person would do. I said, no, thanks. Let's let's just be real. There are way more qualified people on the team. Even the office plants probably had better credentials than I did at that point. But no, it was just one of those God things. And somehow I found myself in charge of this project. Looking back, my journey had more of been of a string of moments where I've been very aware of who I am and more importantly, who I am not. I'm the kid who got kicked out of all classes, not just math, for reading under the desk. The one who could not make it through every single day without tripping over something. Usually it's just me. And if you told me 13 years ago that IJM would hire me, keep me, and trust me with these massive projects, I would have laughed in your face because I still laugh about it sometimes. Um, I've never really relied on myself in this journey because I've learned early on that wasn't the plan. My team has always been my compass. God has been my compass, keeping me humble, reminding me to laugh at myself and trust me, there's plenty of material. And making sure that I don't start thinking I'm more important than the mission. And that is the key there, really, protecting the mission. The job is temporary, the mission is what matters. And I've also learned not to hold on too tightly to titles or positions. I mean, I'm climbing Kilimanjaro here, and you don't scale mountains with a suitcase full of what will people think bag. You pack light, a sense of humor, some perspective, and a solid team to remind you when you're being ridiculous, which in my case is fairly often. So, to sum it up, my story doesn't make sense. I'm the
Yeah.
last person who should be here on paper, but
That,
I've realized that the randomness of my experiences, from selling diapers to setting up events to being an entrepreneur to doing street theater, working in law, has all come together in ways I could have never planned. God has been the ultimate project manager in all of this, and let's be honest, I'm just so glad to be on the team.
that's incredible. Can you share how did you initially get introduced to IJM, and then the God part of your story?
Yeah.
Did you grow up in a Christian? No, share that part too. That's just really cool.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I did grow up in a Christian home, but for me to have that sense of awakening, like I said, was my experience with violence. I was actually in Canada. Still, I just started to walk all over again without the need of support. I was paralyzed for almost an entire year. And that is when the work, yeah, that's a part of the boring details that I didn't cover.
Oh my gosh! What?
So, so it was during that recovery, yeah, just when I, so when I lost, what I lost during my paralysis was a lot of things. My memory, not only couldn't I walk, I was extremely underconfident. I remember going to take my MBA exam because my former employer insisted. At that point, I was still in my wheelchair and I needed a scribe. I couldn't speak. I was drooling saliva
Oh my
because,
gosh!
my sentences didn't make sense. So he was like, no, you get a scribe, you do it, you finish this exam because you have earned it. Um, and I finished that, which by itself was a miracle. And then slowly through therapy and treatment and everything, I start walking. What contributed to the violence was a whole lot of things, but there were two episodes. The second episode was on the face violence by strangers in a city where I didn't know many people, and and that was because I was invested in seeking social justice. So that took me down this path of, at that point, I did not even seek justice for myself. I was just looking at running away, escaping, finding protection, going back home.
Yep.
And my brothers quit whatever jobs they had wherever, came back and became part of my recovery and healing process. But my former employer had submitted the project that I had that got me in trouble in the first place, which was using street theater to educate children, and submitted it to the Sauvé Foundation. He nominated me for this fellowship. So when I got it, I was like, oh, and the first question she asked me was like, can you walk? Do you need a wheelchair? Because we don't have wheelchair access. I was like, no, I'm beginning to walk, but I can't. I take time to speak.
Yeah.
Uh, and and then once I came to the foundation, I had multiple other what do you say, side hustles at that point. Being the VP of a legal process outsourcing unit was one of them, and one of my reportees, technically, she she emailed me and she was like, Anu, apply to this organization. They will torture the living lights out of you with interviews and reference checks, and you will get it because you're smart and all of that. Refuse them after that. I was like, what's wrong with you? Why are you so why are you so mad at this organization? She said, I have been interviewed for a year. They reference checked some 20 people and then they rejected me. And I was like, oh, that's extremely toxic. Anyway, so I did something that I wouldn't do. I looked up this organization and I recall falling on the floor, bawling for the next 6 hours or so, because I knew this is exactly where God wanted me to be. But I was also grieving that I was not good enough anymore, because my law, my master's in everything, all of my experience was useless because I was this battered woman who's now slowly trying to pick up these pieces that have been broken away from me. And I was like, why, Lord? Why now? This is where I think you're calling me to be, but this is where I'm least equipped to be. So that really was one of the moments where I felt like God is calling me here. But my faith journey has been informed by two very different kind of practices that my parents have. My mother is an Orthodox Syrian Christian, so we are technically the Christians who were converted by St. Thomas, who he came, performed a
Yeah.
miracle, and proper Hindus, Brahmins, became Christians overnight. And my dad's side of the family, interesting story. My great great grand uncle wanted to challenge the British for having murdered his brother. And then he wanted to challenge that in the court, but he didn't know English. And a Lutheran missionary gave him an English Bible and a Malayalam Bible and said, "Go learn English." He learned English, but also the ways of the Lord, and decided to be a missionary. So that's how they became Christians. So my father's teachings has been very unique in contributing to my faith journey. There was this traditional side, but there was also this, let's understand the Bible deeply side. So yeah, that's how I came close to God as a child, but my intimacy deepened with my personal experience
That's
with Him.
incredible. That's serious. That's incredible. Anu, I have to ask because I think there's so many people. Before we continue on, I think there's so many people who feel called by God to something, but
Yeah,
then feel exactly what you felt. I'm unqualified. I'm broken physically, emotionally. Like my
yeah,
past is broken, and so they never do it.
yeah.
Encouragement that you would have for that person.
Yeah, I've said this before. If anyone has followed any of the interviews that I've given, and I'll say it again, it is us, the misfits, who get called to seek justice. And the ones who don't quite fit, the ones who feel small or too unsure. Just think about it. Martin Luther King Jr., he wasn't born a hero. He popped the heads off his sister's doll for fun and played baseball with it. And Mother Teresa would probably seem like an oddball to people in Albania, choosing a path of poverty, moving to India and dedicating her life to people she didn't even know. But here is the truth. God chooses the ones who feels the most unworthy, the most ill-equipped, because they are the ones who lean not on their strength, but on His. And let's be real, that voice of doubt, it's always there. The voice that says, you're not enough, you're not smart enough, you're not brave enough, you're not equipped enough for this fight. I've said this myself, heard this myself so many times more than I could even care to count. But if I've learned anything on this journey, is that being chosen doesn't mean being ready or even deserving. It means stepping up anyway, with all your imperfections into and trusting that God's power is made perfect in weakness. Yeah, so it doesn't shield you from the hard stuff. But where do you begin? Where do you begin when you're in a world that is drowning in pain and violence?
Yes.
Because the problems are massive. I won't sugarcoat it, but the beauty of seeking justice is that it does not require grand gestures. It starts in the small places with one step, your step. You don't have to rescue thousands tomorrow, but start by showing up today, right where you are, and decide to care. Open your eyes to the brokenness around you, the person in your community who's been silenced, the neighbor who's struggling, the injustice that everyone else seems to overlook. Start there. Yeah.
That's so good. I was going to come to that later on, but hit that a little bit more if you would. When it comes to as followers of Christ,
Yeah.
battling and fighting against injustice, how do we do that right where we are? Like what like any other tips on that? Because I think like even in Sioux Falls, South Dakota here, it's like, well, where do I do that? How do I do that? What does that look like? Whether I'm
Yeah.
a lawyer, whether I'm a teacher, a banker, or a pastor.
Yeah. I mean, I ask people to take a look at their hands, to look at the gifts that they have already. And it could be anything, your influence, your voice, your words, the creative, whatever it is that God has given.
Yes.
And not to wait till you feel like you're completely ready, because if you're waiting till then, you're never going to start. It's justice is built on million small acts of courage. You don't have to fix everything. We can start by just showing up, by speaking up, and by refusing to stay silent. And whenever that voice of doubt creeps in, remember it is the misfits, not because of who they are, but because of who has called them. So like I said before, it starts by looking around saying, what breaks my heart right now? And start there. You don't have to change the world overnight. It's about showing up where you are and letting God do the rest. But it's a showing up that we hesitate with. You can't carry the weight of all of the world's problems, but you can choose to carry a tiny piece of it, and then we show up again and again. You'll find that justice is less about the grand finale and more about the small, persistent steps that we take every single day.
Oof, that's good. I told someone on Sunday, God chooses to use the foolish things.
Oh,
And if that's true, that's like the one area I am the most
oh, no,
overqualified
no, no. I
individual.
beat you to it. I beat you to it.
I'm
I'm
like,
the dumbest in my family. Like
like,
the stupidest kid in the household.
so I'm gonna brag on you, IJM. You specifically have worked to free more than 10,000 individuals, which is I think about getting to the end of your life and hearing well done, and I feel like you're just getting started. Can you share about that? Like, what does that even mean to see 10,000 individuals rescued? Help us to see that too. If there's a specific story, or what does that even look like?
The truth is, my team laughs about it when we revisit this. The team that came together, it started with three people. I would say two and a half, the half being me and two other people in the team. And we were like, we looked at the map of this country and we were like, okay, let's divide this country into three. You take that, you take this, and you take this. Like, this is how much of a genius leader that these poor guys got. Like, an idiot who thought that a country can be divided into three zones and that we can tackle the problem of freeing thousands of people. Now, what Google said was rescue 3,600 people, ensure that 96% of them do not get back into bondage, and train 1,000 officials so that the public justice system can respond to this crime. So, uh, two and a half clueless people get into this space. And the next 2 years that we were stumbling around, figuring out, learning, was nothing but God's immense faithfulness. The protection that we experienced. I mean, there are so many times that my team and I were like, that was close. We could have completely not been able to go back home to our family with just that one thing going wrong. But the truth is, as I slowly started hiring more, one of the first hires after that was a program manager. We never counted. We never counted. We never realized when we exceeded the goal that Google had mentioned. They said 3,600. We had exceeded 4,000 people by year two.
Oh my gosh.
And my program manager was like, Anu, do you realize that you guys have beat the number like in year two? I was like, no, but we weren't counting because we were so busy, caught in the midst of God doing his thing.
Yes.
So to me, those are not numbers. That is just God and his faithfulness. To me, and the 1,000 people that we were supposed to train became 17,000 police officers, government officials, and NGOs. And this was like literally the first ever IGM's partnership program. We were trying something, stepping in thinking, we could miserably fail. So none of this, I would say, was me or my team. It
Yeah.
was God. So we just had fun watching God do his thing. And and we did it together. It was not me. It was not my leadership. It was so that's how and even today this day uh, so he's like, you remember you never counted? It's like, you didn't count. You took time to count. You didn't count.
Share so help again, like I think it's so easy for most people listening to have no concept of this. So one of those individuals who has been rescued from forced labor and slavery, what is
Yeah.
that? What does their life look like? What does that even mean? Like, why don't they just leave? Why don't again? I think there's for some people it is so hard to even fathom
Yeah.
this.
It is as unimaginable as you paint, Adam. It is oppression at its finest. And when you're thinking slavery, when you're thinking bondage, when you're thinking forced labor, none of them are there because they want to be there. It
Yes.
could be generational. For instance, many of the cases that I've led and rescued thousands from, where it usually started with the grandfather or the great grandfather taking a tiny bit of a loan from a wealthy master in that vicinity to pay for maybe his daughter's marriage or his wife's treatment or a child's birth or somebody's death. All of these things means expenses, but a very small amount. And the master kind of says, okay, I will loan you the money, but then you and your family will work for me and repay. So that is where the first crime begins, making a person work on the basis of a loan or an advance. So they don't know. And then over generations, they keep, because they're illiterate, they do not know what their rights are. They believe that this is part of their destiny, unfortunately. And multiple generations, one rescue that I was part of, this guy, Ronaya, he had taken a loan of less than, I don't know, $20 for helping his wife. When we went to rescue, with the public justice system, what we had witnessed was three generations: him,
Wow.
his son's son. And the woman that he had taken a loan to protect, she had completely lost her mental ability to thrive in a society because of the kind of work that they were working in. They were working in a not in a chicken farm, they were working in a catfish farm. And his job was 22 hours. He would go into the city, buy rotten chicken, travel with that smelly rotten chicken, bring it to the farm, use his bare hands to rip this maggot filled chicken and feed the catfish, which would oftentimes poke around. And it was like the fetid cesspool that he had to work in.
Yeah.
And he didn't know that he could escape. I mean, it is like if you tie an elephant to a tiny piece of a rope, and if it's not able to break free when it's a baby, it is never going to be able to break free, even if it's a gigantic mammoth of an animal. That's exactly what happens when a person is in slavery. You break his spirit and leave the body so that it can serve these masters. So there is generational bondage. There is a debt that is unpaid, apparently, over multiple generations. And then there are people who are tricked and lured into this space by saying, okay, I'll find you a great job. You would be able to make a ton of money. And they're brought from another state altogether, so they don't know the language. They're beaten and abused. And for this master, they own these human beings as property.
Yeah.
So they would exploit everyone. This concept of fatherhood, we briefly spoke about it when we started.
Yes.
The agency is taken from the father, whose primary role is to protect. The agency is taken away from the husband, whose primary role is to protect his wife. All of this happens because the owner, the master, is able to strip this individual of their agency using violence. So, yeah, they work for several hours, they're abused, get paid nothing, or maybe minimum wages, which has been adjusted to the food that they eat. Yeah, it is just everything unimaginable that you can possibly imagine.
No, thank you for sharing that. And even just hearing it, it's like it just opens your eyes to what's going on and just the brokenness and injustice in our world. And also, just for people living in the Midwest listening to this, I've been told several times that Sioux Falls, where we live, is actually a hub for a lot of sex trafficking in our own country. And so often it's like, well, it would never happen here. And it's like, well, actually it is happening here. We have a police officer in town whose sole focus is sex trafficking. Like it's obviously happening here as well. Anu, thank you for sharing that. How do we partner? You shared about steps we can take in our own lives already of fighting back. How can we partner with IJM? I know I just became a freedom partner myself. My wife and I are now
Thank you.
given on a monthly basis. And I'm like, how can I not be a part of this? But if you want to share, how can we partner? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, but before I get to that, the there are different kinds of crimes that are when you're saying, when you're thinking slavery, you're thinking sex trafficking, you're thinking forced labor. But there is also this new crime. Because you called out that Midwest, there is a unit that is taking care of sex trafficking
Yeah.
cases. There is this crime, an emerging crime, online sexual exploitation of children, where 500,000 Filipino children are being exploited by countries that are wealthy, and US ranks the list. It's just unfortunate. It's just unfortunate how countries that are so developed are feeding into this crime. So we need to be aware. And then there is also the cyber scamming that impacts people right
Yeah.
here in the West. And a lot of these, the perpetrators are actually enslaved. These are people who have their passports taken, who are abused, who do not want to be scamming you, but they have this entire racket that is benefiting from this. So I think a good place to start would be by being aware of what is happening.
That's good.
And to your question on how can you and the church partner with IJM, the answer is both simple and profound: by doing what you're already doing, by opening your hearts and minds to this cause, by inviting us to speak and share these stories. You're making a vital impact. So thank you, Adam, for taking this step. But if you're willing and ready to go even further, there are powerful ways to deepen our partnership and relationship. Definitely, financial support is one of them. People ask me, why did you leave the field and come? It's like, because my team asked me to choose from one rescue to another. You don't ask a leader to choose who to rescue. But because of the want of budget, we had to make a decision. If it was this rescue operation or that rescue operation, I should send my team to. You shouldn't let us make a choice like that. So the finance aspect of it is so crucial. Your contributions can transform lives. Every dollar goes directly to the heart of the mission, rescuing and restoring individuals trapped in the darkness of exploitation.
Seriously, friends, how awesome is Anu? I honestly, I was so moved by her story, moved by her humility, moved by the impact that she's had. Again, 10,000 people out of slavery. Thanks to our guest, Anu. Genuinely, it was an honor having you on the podcast. Thanks to our partners, IJM and Vern Eide. Please go find out more about them. Lastly, but not leastly, thanks to every single one of you who listens to the conversation. I am so grateful.